Hey, what's up, you guys, and welcome back to the Creepy and Paranormal Podcast. Today, I am sitting here doing a story that is very controversial, and I'm not too sure how many of you have heard of it, even though it's quite a popular story, but it's one that absolutely grates me to no extent because, yeah, I just hate which way the story ends up, but that is just my own personal belief. But in saying that, I hope you're going to enjoy it nonetheless. I've tried to cram as much information into a shorter episode as much as possible, as there is just too much information out there. So if it sounds a bit mismatched, it's obviously because I've left out some details of the case, but I've tried to cover all of the important stuff. Anyways, here we go. Let's drop the intro and get ready for the episode. So today I am going to be covering the disappearance and death of Caylee Anthony, who was the child and daughter of Casey Anthony. So that is the story we're covering today. It is the story of Casey Anthony. I'm sure that name probably rings a bell. And before we start, quick shout out to our show sponsors, Homeground Coffee as well as Invoice Cloud. Love you guys, love your work. Thank you so much for always being a supporter of the show, as well as just a special shout out to Sam and to Sydney and to the whole family. Just keep on doing what you guys are doing. You're absolute rock stars. So here we go. Casey Anthony was born in March of 1986, the 19th, in Ohio, United States of America. She was born to Cindy and George Anthony, and her father worked in law enforcement. She was brought up alongside one sibling, and she was just an excellent girl when she was young, and she was also branded a liar when she was in high school. But once again, which child isn't? She duped her parents into believing that she was eligible for graduation yet, but she was not. And at the age of 19, she again lied to her parents that she was a virgin, but dum, guess what? She was in fact pregnant. Now, Casey Anthony later told her parents the truth after her stomach started bulging. She did not, however, disclose the identity of the child's father. And this is because she pointed to many men. And in 2005, her daughter Caylee Anthony was born. She wanted to give the baby up for adoption, but her mother refused the idea. Her fiance, Jesse Grund, acted as Caylee's father. Now, Casey lived with her parents together with her daughter, and in 2008, she left her parents' home with her daughter due to disagreements with her mother. On the 16th of June 2008, Casey departed from her parents' home in Orlando, Florida, where she and Anthony resided. George, Casey's father, later testified that he saw Anthony leaving with Casey. Casey told her mother, Cindy, that she was taking Anthony to her nanny, whom Casey identified as Zenadia, aka Zanny Fernandez Gonzalez. And the very next day, she further informed Cindy that the three were headed to Tampa, Florida on a work trip. 30 days after Casey's departure, her car was found abandoned in Orlando and towed away. Now, George and Cindy were notified that the car had been in fact impounded, and when George went to recover the car, he and the tow yard manager noted a strong smell coming from the trunk, which both later stated that they believed to be that of human decomposition. When the trunk was opened, it contained only a bag of trash. That day, Cindy reported that Anthony was missing, telling 911 dispatchers that Casey's car smelled of dead bodies and that she had not seen Anthony for 31 days. Cindy later retracted her statement regarding the car's odor. Caylee then went on to tell investigators that she had left Anthony at the apartment of her nanny Fernandez Gonzalez, and that Fernandez Gonzalez had in fact kidnapped the toddler. But when police investigated the apartment, they found it to have been abandoned for more than 140 days. Caylee also told police that she was working at Universal Studios. But guess what? When investigators took her to Universal Studios on July 16th and asked her to show them her office, Caylee led detectives into the building before admitting that she no longer worked there. And as it turned out, she had not worked there since her maternity leave almost 3 years earlier. Caylee was subsequently arrested, and on July 29, Caylee was offered a limited immunity deal in exchange for help finding Caylee. Prosecutors said they would not use Caylee's statements to police against her. The offer then expired on September 2nd, 2008.
Everybody has their own morning routines, but on the top of my list is coffee. Strong, hot black coffee. I physically can't start the day without a cup. However, sometimes life gets in the way and you're forced to buy a cup of coffee while on the road. And if you're like me, you struggle to find one that tastes good and is affordable. Well, now there is a one-stop solution for you. Homeground Coffee. The name is brilliant and so is the service. Situated at Benoni Northern Sports Ground, it's a nice central point for your morning commute. And why not get a delicious muffin or pie to go along with it? Homeground Coffee is the perfect go-to, and I advise you strongly to give them a try. When you do, let them know that I sent you. Find them on Facebook at Homeground Coffee as well as Instagram. That's Homeground Coffee, HOMEGROUND. Today's sponsor is called Invoice Cloud. Now, this is really awesome if you're an entrepreneur, small business owner, or even a freelancer. You know how difficult it is to manage and then create those invoices for your customers. But with Invoice Cloud, you have everything you need to create simple, professional estimates on the fly. It's easy to use and understand, and getting rid of all the nonsense so you can have more time to do what matters most, which is to grow your business. Invoice Cloud allows you to add your company details, logo, customer information, as well as products, making it a breeze to send estimates to your clients anytime, anywhere. Now, if you want to start your free 7-day trial and get invoicing in just under 5 minutes, all you need to do is head over to invoicecloud.co.za and boom, you are sorted. That's invoicecloud.co.za.
Cindy and George appeared on the Today Show on October 22, 2008. They maintained their belief that Anthony was alive and would be found. Larry Garrison, the president of Silver Creek Entertainment, was their spokesperson until November 2008, citing that he was resigning as spokesperson due to the Anthony family's erratic behavior. On the 11th of August, as well as the 12th and 13th, meter reader Roy Kronk called police about a suspicious object found in a forested area near the Anthony residence. In the first instance, he was directed by the sheriff's office to call the tip line, which he did, receiving no return call though. And on the second reported incident to them, he reported that he had seen what appeared to be a skull near a grey bag. On that occasion, the officer conducted a short search and stated he did not see anything. On December 11, 2008, Kronk again called the police for the third time. They searched and found the remains of a child in a trash bag. Investigative teams recovered duct tape which was hanging around from her hair attached to the skull and some tissue left in fact on her skull. Over the next 4 days, more bones were found in the wooded area near the spot where the remains initially had been discovered. On December 19, 2008, medical examiner Jan Garaviglia confirmed that the remains found were in fact Anthony's. The death was ruled a homicide and the case of death listed as undetermined. After admitting to not working at Universal Studios, Caylee was then arrested and charged with giving false statements to law enforcement, as well as child neglect and obstruction of a criminal investigation. The judge denied bail, saying Caylee had shown woeful disregard for the welfare of her child. On July 22, 2008, after a bond hearing, the judge set bail at $500,000. On August 21, 2008, after 1 month of incarceration, she was released from the Orange County Jail after her $500,000 bond, $500,000 bond was posted by Tony Padilla, the nephew of Californian bail bondsman Leonard Padilla. Leonard said he had hoped he and his nephew could help Anthony find her missing daughter. But when an angry crowd began to gather around the Anthony's home, where Caylee stayed while on bond, Tony decided to revoke her bond, resulting in her return to jail. Leonard further added that Caylee had not wanted to communicate with him at all. And then on September 5th, 2008, she was released again on bail for all pending charges after being fitted with an electronic tracking device. Her $500,000 bond was posted by her parents, Cindy and George, who signed a promissory note for the bond. On October 14, Caylee was indicted by a grand jury on charges of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter of a child, and 4 counts of providing false information to police. She was later arrested, and Judge John Jordan ordered that she be held without bond. A week later, the state dropped the child neglect charges because the neglect charges were premised on the theory that Anthony was in fact still alive. On October 28, Caylee was arraigned and pleaded not guilty to all charges. On April 13 the next year, 2009, prosecutors announced that they planned to seek the death penalty in the case. The jury began deliberations on July 4th, and on the 5th of July, prosecutors stated that during deliberations, they were about to give the jury the correct information with regard to Bradley's software discrepancy. However, the jury reached a verdict before they could do so. One legal analyst stated that if the jury had found Caylee guilty before receiving the exculpatory evidence, the prosecution's failure to fully disclose it could have been grounds for a mistrial. On the 5th of July, the jury found Caylee not guilty of counts 1 through 3 regarding first-degree murder, aggravated manslaughter of a child, and aggravated child abuse, while finding her guilty though on counts 4 through 7 for providing false information to law enforcement. The guilty counts pertain to Caylee's false statements that number 1, worked at Universal Studios, number 2, employed Fernandez Gonzalez as a nanny, number 3, had told the 2 Universal Studio co-workers that Anthony had disappeared, and number 4, had spoken by phone with Anthony after Anthony went missing. On the 7th of July, sentencing arguments were in fact heard, and the defense asked for the sentencing to be based on 1 count of lying on the grounds that the offences occurred as part of a single interview with police dealing with the same matter, the disappearance of her daughter. And in the alternative, the defense argued for concurrent sentencing, that is, for Caylee to be permitted to serve the various sentences at the same time. The judge disagreed with both arguments. Perry found the statements to constitute 4 distinct separate lies. He sentenced Caylee to consecutively 1 year in the county jail and $1,000 in fines for each of the 4 counts of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, the maximum penalty prescribed by law. Because Caylee had been incarcerated since October 2008, she received more than 1,000 days in a time served credit, and she was released just 10 days after the sentencing on July 17th. Subsequently, pursuant to a little-known Florida statute requiring judges to assess investigative and prosecution costs if requested by a state agency, Perry ruled that Caylee must now pay $217,000 to the state of Florida. The prosecution had requested $516,000 in reimbursement, but Perry only found Caylee liable for expenses incurred during the period in which Caylee was reported missing to when the homicide probe opened. In earlier arguments, Mason had called the prosecutor's attempts to exact the largest sum sour grapes because the prosecution lost its case. Looking at the aftermath of the Caylee Anthony trial, Caylee then left for an undisclosed location not long after the verdict. However, on August 12th, she was ordered to return to Florida to serve a year's supervised probation for an unrelated check fraud conviction. Caylee returned to Florida on August 25 and served out her probation in an undisclosed location. And due to numerous threats against her life, the Department of Corrections did not enter her information into the state parole database. In August of 2011, George and Cindy issued a statement that Caylee would not be living at their home when she returned to Florida to serve her probation. According to the Huffington Post, she was reportedly working with her probation officer to take online college classes at an unspecified field, which, while it actually in fact protected her by security at an undisclosed educational institution. In August of 2011, the Florida Department of Children and Families released a report based on a 3-year investigation into Anthony's disappearance and death. An agency spokesperson stated, "It is the conclusion of the DCF that Caylee failed to protect her child from harm either through her actions or lack of their actions, which tragically resulted in the child's untimely death." In March 2017, Caylee gave an interview with the Associated Press saying she understood the reason people felt or feel about me and noting as to the cause of her daughter's death. "As I stand here today, I can't tell you one way or another. The last time I saw my daughter, I believed she was alive and was going to be okay. And that's what was told to me." Caylee later participated in a documentary called Caylee Anthony, Where the Truth Lies, in which she discussed her life before, during, and after the trial. I must say, you need to give it a watch. It was really interesting. A little bit one-sided and biased, of course, but rather nonetheless, it was interesting. In closing, some later information that I came across. In 2012, WKMG-TV television in Orlando reported that police never investigated Firefox browser evidence on Caylee's computer the day of Caylee's death. They only looked at Internet Explorer evidence. The browser history showed that someone at the Anthony household, using a password-protected account Caylee used the Firefox browser to do a Google search for foolproof suffocation at approximately 10 to 3 in the afternoon, and then clicked on an article criticizing pro-suicide websites promoting foolproof ways to die, including the idea of committing suicide by taking poison and putting a plastic bag over one's head. The browser then recorded activity on MySpace, a site that was used by Caylee but not by George. The station learned about this information from Caylee's attorney, Bays, who mentioned it in his book on the case, speculating that George had contemplated suicide after Caylee's death. He conceded to reporters that the records are open to interpretation. However, he speculated that the state may have chosen not to introduce the search at trial because, according to Bays, the computer records tend to refute the timeline stated by George, which was that Caylee had left at 10 to 1 in the afternoon, and an analysis by John Goods, a retired engineer and computer expert in Connecticut, revealed that her password-protected computer account shows activity on the home computer at 20 to 2 in the afternoon, with activity on her AIM account as well as MySpace and then on Facebook. So guys, that is that story, just really summarized, short and quick. I've left out quite a bit of information like I mentioned earlier, but if you have heard of the story before or followed it anywhere, I would love to hear what your take on it is or what your verdict is. For me, there is just too many discrepancies, and she is not a very truthful person. She doesn't look sincere, albeit she's very pretty, but I think she tried to use that to advantage. I think she was guilty of having something to do with her daughter's murder. I don't know what, I don't have any theories, but I definitely think because of her deceitfulness and constant lies to police and law enforcement, I definitely think there is some sort of cover up happening from her end. Like I said, I have no working theories to go by, but I definitely think Caylee Anthony killed her daughter Caylee. And that is where I'm going to wrap up the show today, guys. So as always, when you go to sleep tonight and the room goes dark and the night goes silent, don't forget to look under your bed.